Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Angry J here, back with some more team breakdowns. I'm continuing my tour through the Patrick division, now with the Washington Capitals, a very unusual team in this game. But in 1992-93, they had a little bit above average season, 43 wins, 34 losses, and 7 ties for 93 points. This was good enough for second in the division, but they lost in their first round matchup, the division semifinal against the New York Islanders. And in that process, they knocked out, Dale Hunter in particular, knocked out Pierre Turgeon as kind of a parting gift after that series, or before the series ended. And it was the end to a somewhat disappointing season, another season with high expectations in Washington that just didn't pan out in the playoffs. And this is something that kind of, lasted with them up until this most recent year when they finally did come through and win their first Stanley Cup in 2018. So, NHL 94 version though, at home, they had an average home ice advantage, so they're going to have a few bonuses when they're at home, but nothing overwhelming. And then on the road, they have an average disadvantage, so they're going to have to deal with some penalties to their ratings on the road, but not in overwhelming fashion, thankfully. Washington is a Tier 4 team, but they are a very unusual Tier 4 team, and we'll jump into why that is shortly. I think some of their better matchups and their more consistent matchups are against St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and the Islanders. But Washington's kind of a funny team. You can take them really up and down the tier list pretty easily. You can stretch them out against Edmonton and Toronto, and you could even take them up against a Tier 1 team like Montreal, just because of the strengths that Washington brings to the table that are pretty unique, especially within their tier. And what are some of those strengths? Well, one of those strengths is that they have some high-end CB checking defensemen. CB checking allows heavier players to check lighter players who possess the puck, and Washington has a couple of them that are just absolute beasts, and another guy, Kalle Johansson, who is a very user-friendly CB checking type player. They also have on this team several players with elite level skills. So Iafrate, he's got high shot power, and there's a few other guys that just have just these extremely dominant skills. They also have a unique method of attack, in that it's hard to understand where Washington's going to attack from in terms of whether it's going to be a one-timer or just a guy using his blinding speed to break through the defense, or if they're going to be patient or counterattack or whatever. And none of it's necessarily consistent. I mean, it changes from game to game, so you have to be able to adjust quickly with them when you play with them and against them as well. Washington also has some decent players on defense and in the forward ranks that have some good weight variance. So if you want to play a CB checking matchup, Washington has some personnel to do that. And if you want to go a little bit lighter, more towards weight bug, but not necessarily weight bug type players that are extreme, like if they weigh 172 pounds or 180 pounds, they have some good 188 pound guys, 196 pound guys that can play a little bit more weight bug in counter to the CB checkers. So they have good balance in that regard. And lastly, they have some really good shooting accuracy, especially for a lower tier team. They have just guys across the board that can actually put the puck in the net on a rather consistent basis. But some reasons you might want to steer clear of Washington. First is their very poor goaltending, whether it be artificial intelligence or a manual user goalie. Neither one of them is really going to benefit you in any manner, and it's going to be your main hindrance. Also, chemistry with this team can be hard to find. Like I said, as a strength, they have many different ways that they can attack, but they're not necessarily consistent, and it's hard to understand what game's going to work, what's going to work in what game. So if you can't find that chemistry, you're really in trouble. Also, the players, while they have some really nice skills, they aren't necessarily well balanced. They'll have an amazing skill, but then they'll be crippled by something else that just makes them a very uneven player. They also lack pure weight bug options, as I mentioned earlier. They don't have an Andrei Kovalenko or Theo Fleury or Jeremy Roenick type of guy who you just hit the C button, he's going to check whatever player is in front of him. And lastly, while the forwards do have good shot accuracy, they lack shot power, so you're going to have to get in close to score with your forwards. So jumping into the roster here, let's start with the forwards. We have Peter Bondra at the left wing, Dmitry Kristich at center, and Mike Ridley at right wing. I think this is your best and most balanced line that you can possibly ice with this team. First, Peter Bondra. He is one of the players with an absolutely incredible skill, and that is 6 speed. If you're unfamiliar with the attributes in NHL 94, there are seven attribute ranges, and I'll list those below in the episode description if you're unfamiliar with them. This way, it's just an easy reference for, you see that Peter Bondra has 99 speed, but I tell you he has a 6 speed rating. Well, that's because he's a 6 out of 6 speed rating. So there's 7 ranges, and 0 is inclusive in that. So that's what I'm talking about when I say 6 speed. He also has 4 agility, so he's really an awkward skater. I mean, yes, he's extremely fast, but his first step was a little uninspiring, and when you try and deke with him in close, you're asking a lot of him. But that blinding speed is a huge benefit nonetheless, especially in open ice. He has 4 offensive awareness and 3 defensive awareness, pretty standard stuff there. A little light on the shot power at 3. Shot accuracy is a little bit better at 4. And his passing is only a 3, but his stick handling is at least a 4. So he's not going to be dipsy doodling everywhere, but he has enough stick handling, especially if he's just trying to beat one guy one-on-one. If you try to take him through a whole team, you're probably asking too much of him. 188-pound player, not quite a weight bugger, and the lack of agility makes him really tough to use as a physical presence. But he can hound players and get back involved in plays that anyone on this roster might not be able to. Like trying to back check on a 2-on-1 against, he might be able to get back involved in that play. So he is your speed sniper. He's someone you got to get in close into the goal with to be successful, but he is a very dangerous player nonetheless if given open ice. Another very dangerous player, Dmitry Kristich. Looking at his skating, you wouldn't think he's very dangerous to begin with. He only has 3 agility, 3 speed. He only has 4 offensive awareness and 3 defensive, pretty standard again. But what makes him dangerous is his 4 shot power and his immaculate 6 accuracy. He will be sniping goalies from every which way, much in akin to Luc Robitaille, Mario Lemieux, Eric Lindros. Dmitry Kristich possesses the same shot ratings. So he is definitely a weapon from the middle of the ice. And with a 4 pass accuracy and 4 stick handling, he does have enough ability to play a one-on-one type game in the middle, albeit in limited fashion. You don't want to try and cut through the defense with Dmitry Kristich either, but if there's a move to make to get around one defender, he is definitely capable of it, despite his lack of skating. At 196 pounds, he's a middleweight, not much a defensive option, but he's not a total liability when he has the puck, as 188-pound defensemen, which are pretty common, will not be able to weight bug check him. They don't weigh, they are not light enough in order to do that consistently. So Kristich is your sniper in the middle. He's a bit slow, but where is he? There he is. Mike Ridley should be the one mostly feeding him the puck for those beautiful one-timers. Mike Ridley is your average player here. 4 agility, 4 speed, 4 offensive awareness with 3 defensive. Very similar shot ratings to Bondra, 3 power, 4 accuracy, and same stick handling and passing as Kristich with 4 each. So he's very balanced. 212 pounds, only 2 checking. He's not a huge CB checker, but against some really light players, he might be able to knock them down with a CB check, but he's mostly a poke checker. He's just your good balanced player to have, and it's actually a really nice place for him to be, because Bondra and Kristich are so heavily skewed one way, and then to have a guy that can do a little bit of everything like Ridley is really nice to have, and which is why I think he deserves a place in this lineup. But not everybody necessarily agrees with that, because if you're a weight bug type player, you prefer weight buggers, Ridley's not going to be your cup of tea probably. So one guy you might want to look at is Bob Carpenter. Bob here, he's kind of a balanced player as well, but not quite as well as Ridley. He's got 4 agility, 4 speed, only 3 awareness on each side of the ice, 3 power and a shot, but that shot accuracy of 2 is really not appealing at all. He's very limited as a goal scorer, but the passing of 4 and the stick handling of 3 does mean that he is capable of carrying the puck on the outside and dishing off a pass if necessary. 196 pounder, he's not much better in terms of being a defensive type player, but in certain matchups, having a 196 pound player might be more appealing than a 212 pound player. So Bob Carpenter can be your first guy off the bench. Another guy to consider off the bench, but not necessarily a weight bug type player, is Kelly Miller. Similar skater, 4 speed, 4 agility, similar awareness, 3 on each side of the puck. His shot's a little bit better, 3 power, 3 accuracy, and the passing and stick handling are actually a little bit upgraded with 4 in each. But at a 204-pound player, he's again in a middleweight. He might be a little bit more accessible to those 188-pound defensemen, which can be fairly common. But in Tier 4, Kelly Miller should be okay. I actually think he's a pretty good player if you can get past his fairly average shot ratings. But I think Ridley is a little bit better overall in terms of, just he has a little bit better shot accuracy, he's a little bit more aware. So I'm willing to trade the extra little bit in weight for those extra skills. And that's really essentially it in terms of depth players that you really want to consider using with Washington. I mean, they have a couple other guys I'll just go over real quick. Michael Pavanka, but at 3 skating, 3 agility, 3 speed, his skills, it can be tough to use him out on the wing because he's not a shooter. He's got 3 shot power, 3 shot accuracy, so you can't put him in the middle. And that lack of skating, even with the 4 passing and 4 stick handling, just make him a really difficult person to ice. And then you also have Pat Elniak. He's your backup centerman if you choose not to put Bondra there. He's got 3 agility, 3 speed, 3 shot power, 5 accuracy, so very similar to Kristich, but obviously a little bit lower in each category. And at 2 passer, 3 stick handler, he's just a pure sniper, and he's not much of a defensive player to boot because of the lack of skating. So you really want to, I think, stay with these 3 guys. I'm okay with really moving them anywhere. You can put Bondra in the center, Ridley on the left, Kristich left, right. It doesn't matter. The important thing with Washington is finding what makes you comfortable. And I think these 3 guys, regardless of where they are, will allow for the most utility offensively, defensively, and will give you the most comfort when using them, because they can be kind of weird to use if you are unfamiliar with them. On defense, it's a little bit more conventional. My first man off the bench here, coming in for Kevin Hatcher, is Kalle Johansson. He's a very nice CB checking defenseman that I listed in the strengths earlier. He has 4 agility, 3 speed, so that extra mobility over Hatcher's more limited mobility is a very nice thing to have, I think. He'll be playing his natural side as a left-hander, 3 offensive winners, 4 defensive, so pretty standard stuff there for a defenseman. 4 shot power, 1 accuracy is decent for a defender. If he ever gets the puck off his stick, he might be able to sneak a slapper by a goalie because people are not necessarily familiar with Kalle Johansson's ratings. 4 passing, 4 stick handling are actually really nice ratings to have for defensemen. I mean, he's kind of a hidden gem. People tend to forget about him, I think, because Kevin Hatcher is just the starter and Sylvain Cote is your weight bug option. But Kalle Johansson, 212-pounder, 3 checker, can be good enough there in a lot of cases. He's a really solid guy to have. He can even go up against some of the quicker wingers because of his extra uptick in agility. His partner, Al Iafrate, he is the all-star here. He is the anchor on the back line, the man with the skullet, the party in the back and nothing in the front. Has a 4 agility, 4 speed rating, so he's nice mobile defenseman with 4 offensive awareness and 4 defensive. He has a booming shot. This is his extreme strength, which is a 6, and he's actually got a fairly accurate shot for a defenseman at 2. He has the most accurate 6 rating slap shot for a defenseman in the game. Passing 4, stick handling 4, so he's a really nice balanced defenseman, except for his 228 pounds, which can be a divisive rating. If you like CB checking, Al Iafrate is an absolute beast. He is a weapon. He makes Washington a much more dangerous team. If you are not able to CB check and you prefer or only capable of weight bug checks, Iafrate is reduced to poke checking, and he's a decent enough skater to do that, but you're not getting that nice high ceiling play that Iafrate that you could get otherwise, which makes Washington a more elite team, or not necessarily elite team, but a more competitive team once you take them up the ladder. For checking, he's going to do some checking on his own in AI mode, and he's going to check most everybody in CB check user mode. He's going to get Yager and Lemieux in a lot of cases, and that's pretty big deal because you don't have 2 weight bug defensemen you can really ice to play physically against those guys on Pittsburgh. So having Iafrate be able to do that, play physically as well as play smart and positionally, it's just a huge advantage for the Capitals. Guys you can bring off the bench, they have a few of them. Sylvain Cote is your weight bug option, very basic guy, 3-3 skater, 3 speed, 3 agility, 3 awareness on defense, or offense, and 4 on defense. Shooting of 3 for power, accuracy 2, and his passing and stick handling are 3 each. So very average player, 188 pounds. He's your weight bug checker, but he's not a weight bug monster. He's pretty basic player, so he is a guy to use in certain matchups. Those matchups would be against probably 8 weight players or 9 weight players, guys that maybe Kalle Johansson can't check consistently. 8 weight would be 204 pounds and 9 weight would be 212 pounds. Kevin Hatcher, also another option. The only real issue with him is lack of mobility. 3 agility, 3 speed, And at 236 pounds, that lack of mobility is magnified. The heavier a player is, the harder it is for them to accelerate and decelerate, and it's also more difficult for them to turn. So while Sylvain Cote and Hatcher have the same skate ratings, Cote is a superior skater because he is a lighter player. The physics in the game allow for lighter players to be more efficient with their skating. Kevin Hatcher is a right-handed option with 4 offensive and 4 defensive awareness. He has 5 shot power, so that's a nice elite rating. And with 2 shot accuracy, that's a really nice shot. I mean, if you put Hatcher and Iafrate out on the ice, people have to respect your firepower from the back line, and it could help aid your forwards because teams will be trying to jump out on these big defensemen letting shots rip, and then you can find these open men down low and maybe work a nice 1-2 play down low to find yourself an easy tap and one-timer. So putting these guys out there together can be a big deal. He has 4 passing and 4 stick handling, so he's a very skilled defenseman. It's just the 236 pounds is the issue. That's if you can overcome that with 4 checking and average mobility. He's really a CB force to be reckoned with, on par with Iafrate, really. They can check anybody in the game with their CB checking, essentially. So if you can figure that out, that's another huge advantage that you'll have. Last guy you can consider off the bench for Washington's Cavallini. 3 agility, 3 speed, 3 shot power, 3 passing, 3 stick handling. Just a very basic defenseman, but 220 pounds, 3 checking. He's another CB option to bring off the bench if you start running out of defensemen for whatever reason. So that pretty much wraps up Washington's position players, but now to the goaltending, which is a real issue. Dom Beaupre, it's tough to recommend him. 3 agility. He's got 3 in everything, really, I think. Yeah, he's got 3 in every category. So his stick ratings, his glove save ratings, his puck control, it's all 3. The only good thing about Beaupre is his lightweight, 172 pounds. He's going to be pretty snappy in manual goalie control, but at 3 agility, he's only going to be so snappy. And if you get him on the road when he's facing some attribute penalties, he's going to feel really bad. So you have to be aware of this because his AI goaltending leaves a lot to be desired. And even if you plan ahead with him in manual, he's only going to be so good. So you're better off probably just playing defense that keeps shots off the net entirely. You don't want to be giving up shots at all with Beaupre because you're handicapped with him. So, but he is your best bet on this roster. Tabaracci, I think, is his backup, and yeah, he's not an option. So you got to roll with Beaupre regardless. Okay, so let's review Washington before we jump into this match here I have with Toronto. With Washington, the most important thing is to adjust to your team and how they're playing. Washington, they have some elite skills, but they don't always click all at the same time, and they don't necessarily click together. I mean, the players don't always play off of each other. They kind of have a chemistry issue akin to Buffalo. So you have to figure out who feels good, what looks good, what's working, and then run with that. And you have to figure it out pretty quick because you don't want to fall into a big hole if you can avoid it. Use your defenseman as your main way to match up with other teams in terms of checking and weight advantage. So Washington has a good weight bug defenseman, Sylvain Cote, and several good CB checking defensemen. So if you're not using all your defensemen in various matchups and matching up, you're doing yourself a disservice with Washington because that's one of their strengths. Also, you want to get the D involved on the offense with this team. They have a plethora of skill, skating, shooting, puck handling, passing. They have it all. Get them involved. This will also throw off your opponent because you don't always necessarily get your defense involved, especially if they're as unskilled as some of the other teams that will be coming up, like Philadelphia in this division. They have a really bad defense core. Work Bondra's speed on the wing. This is critical because he is one of the things that allows Washington to move up the tier list with ease, because he's a very fast skater. If you can find a way to get defenses on their heels with Bondra, you're going to open up everything else with Washington. Also, utilize your manual goalie with Beaupre. Like I said before, he's bad in AI. He's bad in manual, but the only way he's going to be any better is if you use him yourself. And lastly, be creative with Washington. The nice thing about Washington is your opponent doesn't always know what the game plan is. So don't be afraid to just go do something crazy with them and throw your opponent for a loop. You might get a goal out of it and shift momentum and put yourself in a situation where you can succeed. All right, so with that said, let's jump into this matchup here with Toronto. Toronto is a more balanced team than Washington, but Washington has the elite skills in this matchup. They have the shot power, they have the accuracy, they have just these big hulking defensemen that can handle Toronto's average skating forwards. If you can keep the puck off your net, it's a consistent theme with Washington's matchups, then you have a high chance of success here, because I think Washington is just a much more dynamic team. If you're going into a tournament and you're looking to have just consistent teams at your disposal, you want to have, matchups that you can easily predict, what's going to happen, and you know what you're going to get out of your players every time, then Washington is not a team for you. You want to steer clear of them entirely. If anybody picks a matchup with Washington in it, you will likely want to pick the other team, because the teams that Washington matches up better with, Toronto, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Edmonton, you generally know what you're going to get out of them from game to game. They're much less unpredictable, is what I'm trying to illustrate here. Whereas Washington, they're the goofballs. They could be amazing one game and absolutely wretched another game, and you may not always know what you're going to get. So, but if you want a team that can throw your opponent off and be a dynamic team and just maybe steal a win on someone who isn't prepared for such a thing, then Washington is the team for you, because they're goofballs. That's what they do. When I played in the last King of '94 tournament, I was in the finals against King Raph, and I was down a game in the finals, and it was the best 2 out of 3. So if I lost my next game, or if I lost the game after that, I was going to be in the losers bracket, and I was going to have a much tougher road to try and win the tournament. So what did I do? So I picked a really surprising matchup. I picked Montreal, Washington. Why did I do that? Because I didn't think a matchup with Washington would be expected. Montreal is a very consistent team. You know what you're going to get at Montreal. You know what the game plan is going to be when you play against Montreal, because they do a few things very, very well, and you don't really want to divert from that if you can help it. So I had a feeling I was going to get Washington, and I wanted to do weird stuff because I didn't want to be predictable that game. So if you don't want to be predictable in a matchup, use Washington. But you need to put the time in the lab before you do something like that. It wasn't too long ago that when I was using Washington, I had no idea how to use them. I thought they were terrible. Most people in the community don't have any idea how to use them. They don't get picked very often in tournaments. They don't get picked very often in online league formats. They are largely a forgotten team. One of the more forgotten teams, really, especially when you consider that they're not an expansion team. I mean, people forget the expansion teams in online leagues all the time because they're bad. People just forget Washington because they just don't think they're any good. And it's because a lot of people don't put the time in to figure out what makes Washington good. And what makes Washington good is that they have serious capabilities on defense with their in terms of playing defense, because you don't want the puck to get close to Beaupre. So when it comes to guys like Iafrate and Hatcher and Johansson, they have a lot of diverse defensemen who are capable of doing a lot of things on the ice, and they can take over a game in a lot of cases, on both sides of the ice. And that's really the powerful thing with Washington, is that they're capable of that. Not a lot of teams are. That's a nice shot. That's why Beaupre is an issue. Even a shot like that isn't really a deke shot, it's pretty easy to cut it on him like that, like Borshevsky did on the far post. And then right there with Bondra, I had to make that deke early because of his lack of agility. Usually I'd wait longer, right, until I got closer to that near post. But I had to shoot it pretty early with him because of that lack of agility, as I said. It's something you have to be aware of, for sure. Another reason why Washington is good is they have a lot of elite skills at the forward rank. So they have a guy with 6 shot accuracy and a 4 shot power, which is, I think, a really good rating, which means they have a guy that can score on the upper echelon of goalies. Dmitry Kristich can score on Ed Belfour with consistency. He can score on Patrick Waugh with consistency. You can take him up the ladder, and you're going to have a legitimate goal scorer. Whereas, with some of these other tier 4, tier 5 teams, you don't have that ability. So that makes a huge difference. Also, they have elite speed with Peter Bondra. 6 speed always has to be respected, especially if there's any semblance of skill with that player. And Bondra has just enough skill to where you have to be very aware of where he is on the ice at all times, because if he gets the puck, if he gets open space, you're going to get hurt real bad. And it's that type of dynamic offense, that quick strike offense that the elite teams have, and Washington, they don't necessarily possess it in spades, but they can do it. And that's the important thing, is that they can do it. And if you do it 2 or 3 times in a game, that's huge. That's the type of advantage you're looking for in these one-off type situations. And that's why you might pick a surprising matchup that your opponent's just not expecting it. They're expecting you to do something totally conventional, and you pick Washington, and you get a little creative with the matchup. It's totally unconventional. It's just it's an ace up the sleeve, and I think it's a critical thing to know that you have this ace up your sleeve when needed. I mean, you don't need to be doing this sort of thing every time in a tournament. This might be something you only do once, maybe twice, and probably not twice on the same guy. You might do it, once on one guy and once on another guy, because once you play this card, it loses a lot of its luster. Washington can become easy to shut down if their players are cold or things just aren't working and you're not figuring it out fast enough. They can be a team that goes down early in a game, and it's really tough to come back with them because they don't always necessarily work on the same page. You might have 1 or 2 guys working together, but it's tough to get the whole team together. So you don't want to just go to the well too many times, as they say, with this one. But I think it's a nice thing to have just as a part of your arsenal, and because weird stuff happens in tournaments. Things develop pretty quickly. You might be feeling a certain way about a team, leading up to a tournament differently than you might otherwise. Because I didn't know how to use Washington until maybe a few weeks before the tournament, or a few months, because I was actually putting some time in with them, and I wanted to figure them out. I wanted to understand why people stay away from them, and I also wanted to understand what people are missing about them. Because if people are staying away from them, I think they're probably missing something about the team, especially when it's a team that they have some skilled players. So just understanding that you have to play a game where you're adapting quickly. It's very strategic. You don't just put your head down with Washington and go try to do the same thing over and over again. You gotta be flexible. You gotta read your situation. You gotta know your matchup. You gotta know the strengths of the other team and know how to take advantage of them with what Washington can do. And that's kind of a funny goal. And then I started to finally peel back the layers of Washington and why they're actually a pretty exciting team to use. And I think the community as a whole is starting to see why. As when I read people's comments about Washington and their players, they're a little less doom and gloom. And yeah, like I said, they're a team you may not see a lot, but you might start seeing them a little bit more and more as if you continue to stay in the community, if you play online leagues and you play tournaments and just exhibitions in general. Even in exhibitions, I don't see people using Washington. I don't play as much exhibition as I used to, but when I was, Washington was certainly not a team that people really considered. So this game is kind of illustrative of Washington's terrible goaltending. They've a couple of goals that Bo Prey's let in have been pretty poor, and then I let in a poor one with Manuel goalie. He's just really easy to pick off if you leave him unattended. So it's just important to get your guys back with Washington. You have Bondra. He's not a great checker in terms of playing the body or being a great poke checker on certain players, but he can get back into the play with his elite speed and at least take away passing options and just kind of be a pest on the puck. So they have some good defensive utility, not only with the defensemen but their forwards as well. And it's really important to make sure you use those things to your benefit with Washington. So that's pretty much the Capitals. Very exciting team. I think this is definitely not a user-friendly team. If you want to be familiar with this team, you need to put the time in with them before you just plunk them into a big situation. So hopefully this opens your eyes a little bit and gets you using Washington more in the future. With that said, this is pretty much it for this episode. I'll be back next episode with the third place team, the New York Islanders from the Patrick Division. So if you like this episode, just leave me a comment. Or if you have any questions, just feel free to ask them in the comments, and I'll be happy to get back to them as soon as I can. And otherwise, I hope you guys stick around for any upcoming videos in the future. Until then,